is a program that's undertaken. Initially, it was undertaken each fortnight through the pandemic, and last year we had some great feedback from all of you guys that you loved the series we brought you. So we're continuing it on this year, and the purpose is to keep the South Australian tourism industry and our key stakeholders engaged and informed as we move through the next 12 months and what that might bring to us. So good morning to you all. Today, as we record these sessions, today is Wednesday the 17th of February. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Kathy Ramsey, the Partnerships Manager here at the Tourism Industry Council, the peak body for tourism. I'll introduce Peter to you in a moment, but just a couple of housekeeping matters that I have popped up on the group chat. Let's just keep microphones on mute. And as I said earlier, appreciate if everybody could use the chat function. We'll work through any questions. And as we've got such a small group today, I'd love to have you take yourselves off mic when off mute, sorry, when I let you know, and you can have some really good Q&A with Peter as well. So today we are joined by Peter Barry. Many of you might see Peter's face as being a familiar face, as he's been sort of a regular attendance at a lot of TKSA events over the past couple of years. He is the account manager for Hostplus here in South Australia, with 20 years experience in financial services. He was prior a state and territory manager, SANT, with ME Bank for 8 years. So we've got a lot of wealth of knowledge with us today. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning, and thanks for having me. And as much as I've got a bit of a script, I'm not real good at staying to script, which I think is good in this size group because we can have a really good chat and anyone can ask some questions and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Being a super company, though, the first thing I'm going to start with is our disclaimer, which is everyone on the telephone today or on the Zoom meeting. I don't know your personal situation, so whatever we talk about today is going to be pretty general. So don't race off to your financial planner or off to somewhere else and make some drastic changes and say, Peter said to do this because I didn't. So that's the disclaimer part. But yeah, look, when it comes to finances, you've got to look at what your own personal situation is as well. And then obviously we're going to talk about what your role is in your business as well. You might have staff and so forth, and how it might impact them.
Yeah, but, fabulous.
Let's have a bit of a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Peter, superannuation has been such a hot topic, hasn't it? As we've moved through the past 12 months, we've seen people accessing it for financial support through the pandemic. And then obviously the increase to employer contributions sort of earmarked for July. Mm-hmm. Tell us what is the current situation with superannuation at the moment with Australia and probably South Australia?
Yeah, so look, it's an interesting situation, and I suppose one of the great big things that happened with super last year is that as part of the relief to help people who were out of work or struggling as a result of COVID, the government made an unusual thing, and something they haven't done before, which is made it quite a broad, open opportunity for people who were in financial stress to access their superannuation. And a lot of people did. So I've got some numbers as far as, what happened as far as the country is concerned, how many people did there. And, Hostplus, we have 1.2 million members, but when you look at who we look after hospitality, tourism, recreation and sport, and just about everyone that was shut in the middle of that pandemic period. So we're probably a really good opportunity to get an idea of, how much those people were impacted. We had something in the tune of about 10% of all the superannuation that was drawn out in the country came out of Hostplus. Wow. So pretty big hit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just let me flick through my little notes so I get the numbers right. But so as a national or as a nation getting into superannuation, one of the things that got tapped into, of course, being the super was the early release. It came in two sections. So they did an opportunity where people could dip into their super up to about $10,000 or however much they may have had. Worked out that the average that was withdrawn in that first opportunity, which was from when the pandemic first kicked in and they announced it up until the 30th of June, most people drew out about $7,500.
So,
Go on.
yeah, so how long will that take for that to be replenished potentially? And was that more the younger generation or that close to retirement?
It was a bit of a mixed bag, actually. A lot of them were. We were surprised because we found with our customers or our members, some of them been members of ours for 10 years, and that would put them in that early mid-30s age range.
Yeah.
We found that they were the people probably with children, with families, with mortgages or rents and so forth. So they were the ones that were particularly hard hit. There was an opportunity for people who had a Centrelink income of some sort. They were pretty much an automatic opportunity that they didn't need to cross too many thresholds before they were allowed to. So what happened is you had to apply with the tax office. There was a questionnaire, and it was all about, were you either a low income or were you on a Centrelink assistance of some sort, or had you been put out of work and had you dropped down to say 30% of what you'd normally be earning.
Yeah, okay, interesting. Good perspective there.
Yeah, the numbers are massive. The last count, and I haven't looked at it since the end of September, but the last count from superannuation, not just Hostplus, was $32 billion had been taken out of superannuation in the country and put back into the economy.
Wow. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how long that takes to be replenished in people's funds as well.
Yeah, and look, it depends on who they are and their attitude towards superannuation. Some people did use it as a bit of a money grab, in that here's the money I haven't been able to get my hands on, or I won't be until I'm 65, and they've taken it out. Some have used it to reduce debt. Some have used it, obviously, many used it just to pay for groceries and to pay for rent and things like that. But others did use it to either reduce debt or, anecdotally, we come across people and we talk about it. I met a young couple the other day, and they'd taken it out and they put it in their savings account because that was the way they thought they would be able to get a deposit to buy a house.
Yeah, okay.
So there's some people, and you could kind of argue, is that a good move or a bad move? I guess if they're putting it from an asset to an asset, it's better than taking it from an asset, being your super, and blowing it on perhaps a cheap car or a motorbike.
Yeah.
We've heard too.
Yeah, absolutely. So that goes on then, Peter, like you shared, everybody has a different mindset around super, and it probably changes by generation particularly. Mm-hmm. So how should we be talking to our employees about superannuation? Probably millennials is a big sector of them. Employees for our members. So how should we be talking about superannuation to our employees?
Well, the first thing is, I think that as employers, we should be talking to our employees, and there's a little bit of a thing as an employer, where do you cross the line as to what do you help people with and not? But what we've found, and the research we've done, is employees who feel connected to their business, and employees who feel financially secure and those sort of things tend to be have a better relationship. So there's that stickiness of the employee there. So from a business point of view, there's certainly a benefit to have that relationship with your staff, especially when we've been through some hard economic times. The other thing that we've...
Yeah, sorry, go. I cut you off there. I was going to say, and what about the obligation to the employer? What's the employer's obligation to talk to their employees?
There isn't really an obligation as such. There's certainly no legal or legislative obligation, other than that there's the obligations that if someone's ordinary time hours earned, you've got to pay superannuation if they're earning over $450 a month. So there's the obligation that you've got to do there. When someone first starts working for a member, then obviously there's an obligation to have a discussion with them about super. So super choice is a part of that discussion when they're onboarding. So it would be a case of, do you have an existing super fund? Do you want to use that existing super fund? Some employees are silent and don't send back the paperwork. And obviously from an employer's point of view, they've got to do something when super is due. And typically what they do in that situation, if the employee was not engaged in super, they would pay it into their default super fund.
Okay, yeah.
So that's what happens there. But certainly there's no obligation. But what we're finding is we get invited into employers, particularly some of the big ones, because there's part of their culture is they want a well-being element to their being in their workplace. And certainly they can do it through training and education on the job. And even charitable baskets and things like that, employers are pretty good with that sort of thing, or social days and so forth. What we find a lot of employers struggle with is, how do you connect that financial well-being into the workplace? That's a harder box to tick because they don't have the expertise. Of course, there's also, you talk about where do the conversations go. Employers have got to be careful, because you don't want to be seen to be giving financial advice that you don't actually have the qualifications to give. So when it comes to that sort of stuff, we're often invited in to employers, and we just do some lunch and learns, or we talk about, Super 101, what's it about, or whether it's, how to do some budgeting and free up some money so you can pay a little bit into your super, or if you pay extra, what's the compounding effect going to be, and how's it going to help?
Exactly. And I think it's just to build that education, and particularly what we've been through now even more is, like you said, a part of that well-being is financial sustainability as well. We all know if our finances aren't in check, that's probably the biggest cause of stress as well. That's interesting to learn that, and great to know that you guys are available to come in and be that third party rather than the employer, like you said, who aren't necessarily qualified in that space to have the conversations, but are having that duty of care and showing the importance of it to their staff and using your resources there.
Yeah, well, I think it's a worthwhile thing for employers to do, because I think it helps that when you've got people that you obviously care about and you can show that that's the case, I think you just have that better rapport with your workers. I think you've got that better culture within your business and people feel connected, and that's where we can help out.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in terms of, I think that's some great ways of which how we look at talking about superannuation to our staff is using your services such as you guys and getting other people into talking about that. As an employer though, what should we be looking at when we're looking at superannuation? And, obviously we have to give forms over to our employees. What should we be looking for in a superannuation company when we're sort of in a level of trusted position by the employee as we give them their employment packs and forms? What should we be looking at there?
Yeah, well, look, I think the main thing is employees expect the employer to get it right. So where do we fit into that? That's where we educate employers and keep people up to date with legislative changes. What's changed, what are the headwinds, what's coming. So we find that that's something that's really helpful.
Yeah.
I need a sip of water while we do this.
No, that's all right.
For example, there was a Royal Commission and the findings were released a couple of years ago, but we're still finding the ripple effect of that, which is, how do finance companies behave, and superannuation has been part of that. So there are some changes. So there's some changes moving forward in that super is due to go up, as you mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. Now, there's still noises around Parliament and some commentators that do we hold off on that because there's some businesses trying to recover financially. Yeah. But at the moment, it's still the green light is to go, where super will move up from 9.5% up to 10% on the 1st of July.
Yeah, and so what do you think potentially will be the fallout from that, Peter? Like, will some people think that, that's coming from their own pay increases? Particularly that millennial sector, employee, they might have the main mindset that it is coming from their own pay increases. What's
Yeah.
what's the conversation there?
Well, I think the conversation is it's a positive for the member. So our member and the staff of your members, to just get that clear. So from an employee's point of view, it's their super component increases. So from that point of view, anyone who's on a typical salary, they'd have an hourly rate that they get paid on, and then typically super is on top. So for that person, they're essentially getting a pay rise. So I would say there's probably not going to be a lot of concern from employees, other than perhaps their ability to understand it.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's some employers out there, and that's why some commentators are saying, do we definitely do it, but do we hold off on this, in that it's going to be a cost to some businesses. Some would argue not huge, and others would argue it's going to be quite significant.
Okay, yeah.
But so the idea, though, is, if we look at the working population today there's about 4.7 people working for each retired person. They reckon by 2050, potentially that could be 2.7 people working for every retired person. So if you can imagine, from a government point of view, where we live in a country where we do our best to make sure that people are supported financially and with health regards and so forth, there's going to be pressure on the taxpayer if there's not an element of self-funded retirees in the next 30 odd years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's the mindset as to why to increase it, because we can see that we've got an ageing population.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose that goes into the next thing I was going to talk about and ask you about, Peter. Superannuation, it's about retirement. It's that retirement sort of nest egg, people probably refer it to, and it's about our financial sustainability once we go into retirement, and particularly with you touching on those figures there. So how do we go about managing our super for that dignity, I suppose, is it the right word, in retirement?
That's actually a great word. I think there's a couple of ways to look at super. I think the first thing is be careful with where you're paying your fees. So what we talk with a member, or a non-member for that matter, when you're looking at what to do with your super, you've got admin fees, and then you've got your returns on the money that's invested. And the key is, don't look at one of those things. Sorry.
That's all right. Take a breather. I'm going to have a water too. Always gets you at these times, isn't it?
I don't think I've quite got it yet, so I might need to have another sip in a minute.
No, that's right.
So low admin fees is a key, but don't look at that in isolation. You've got to look at good returns.
Okay,
likewise, don't just look at returns, look at the fees. So it's the net result that people should be looking at.
Yeah, it's about getting that balance across the line. So in that, how can Hostplus help us? There is so many superannuation companies out there, and Hostplus is a specialist one in hospitality and tourism and sport and rec and those sort of service sectors associated to us, particularly in tourism. So what are you guys doing with your members, and how could that be of benefit for our members?
Yeah, so a couple of things there is the good news for our members is we've got a lot of them. That's the first thing.
Yeah.
As in, we've got about 1.2 million. So what that does is that sort of eases our efficiencies in that we don't need to charge huge admin fees because there's a lot of people. So the load is somewhat shared there.
Yeah.
The other thing that we've got is we've got pretty good cash flow in that with people paying in, we've got our average age of the Hostplus member, if we look at our whole portfolio, is around 32 or so.
Okay.
That gives us an opportunity. We're not knee-jerk in our investment strategies, in that we don't try and chase shares or something of that nature. We invest for long term.
Yeah.
And the benefit there is we've done pretty well with that. And because we've got a younger demographic, we can do that because we don't have a huge pressure on us to be drawing money out. So we're pretty lucky in that regard. But as far as what can employers do, I think the important thing for you is really we want to make super easy for you, for employers. So we've got dedicated helplines. We've got online access. When there's legislative changes, we share that and we let you know what you've got to do. So I think it's really important. The other thing we do is we've got clearinghouses. So someone might have, you know, if you've got 40 employees working in your business and they've got super for half a dozen different super companies, we've got a clearinghouse. So basically send us and we'll disperse it to all the super funds for you. One super payment. So we can link that into payroll systems and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely. And that I could imagine for a large employer would be so valuable because otherwise that's a resource itself to a laboursome task, I could imagine.
Absolutely, and it's and you know that makes a big difference to someone. You know, you've got someone in an admin role where they could be focused on working on other elements to the business. You don't really need to time up for a day or two with superannuation or payroll and so forth. So we try and make that easy. And the other thing we do, we're pretty good at collecting data. You know, we're a super company and data is king for us. We can provide one of our employers a demographic report. So when you say how does an employer help an employee, they probably don't know where the need is, but we do. So, for example, we could look at a large hotel in the city, or whether we look at a caravan park or whatever it is, or a smaller employer, you know, doing tours. We can have a look at the people that contribute super to us, and we can see who's got insurance and who doesn't, or who's nominated about who, if something is to happen, have they nominated their beneficiaries and so forth. And we actually had a country pub last year where there was an unexpected death, which was really sad. But we were able to help the family in that situation because we knew about their business, we knew about what the person wanted and so forth, because we'd have an opportunity to spend time with that employer and say, do you realise half your staff haven't nominated a beneficiary? Have you? And then we've done a little bit of a blitz and worked there and said, let's get that up to date.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I love about what you're saying, Peter, is yes, you've got such a bank of resources and helplines for employees to go, but you guys have got a team. You're out on the road. It's not just to sign a form, send it off, do your contributions quarterly or however an employer is obligated to do it, but you're actually engaged and work with the employee, care for them.
Yeah, look, we find that we've got a lot of members, so we do a lot digital. We've got a fantastic app that our members that have to see that their payments are going through and so forth. But where we find we can do our best work is actually supporting employers, because if employers have got our support, then we know that their staff are going to be looked after as far as superannuation goes. If there's some messaging, you know, a lot of people have closed Facebook pages for their staff these days as a real good messaging board. We come up with some helpful tips. So to your point earlier, you know, how do people recover from taking their super out of COVID? We've got some cool little videos about extra contributions and what it might do, and just 2 minutes. But we share those with them. Really cool. They share them on social media. So if anyone on this meeting was interested in seeing any of that stuff, we're very happy to talk about it.
That's awesome. And on that point, guys, I feel like I'm catching your tickle through the screen. On that point, guys, I will flick out an email with Peter's contact details to you all post this session. As we've been enlightened, he's a wealth of knowledge and information. So, you know, if you've not, you know, you don't want to have a question here, just take it offline and I'll connect you directly with Peter through that email as well.
Yeah. Something else that I just sort of wouldn't mind talking about, and again, whether you're a Hostplus, if you use us for your superannuation, terrific, you'd have a conversation with us anyway. But even if you're not, yeah, I'm happy to help and support the industry from a service point of view. One of the things I mentioned a moment ago is that within superannuation, people have insurance, and the insurer that we use is MetLife. MetLife is actually a really good supporter of us and source of information as well. And during COVID, they did a survey about people's well-being and how people were feeling within themselves. And we found that that was a really useful tool, twofold. One was within our own organisation about how to connect and help people out. So we, particularly if you consider our head offices in Melbourne, we've had people working from home for months. And we worked out that we really needed to find ways to keep in touch with those people to help them from a mental well-being point of view and giving them a purpose and so forth, because that's really important. So we got this feedback, and I've been sharing it with pretty much anyone I can talk to about it, which is, you know, the stats are 1 in 4 people are feeling mentally drained or stressed or not themselves because of COVID and because of finances and so forth. And so, you know, that's a quarter of the population are impacted by this.
That's it. I shouldn't say I'm not surprised, but it's you know, it is confronting when you hear the statistic, isn't it? But it just shows how vitally important that financial element is a part of a wellbeing strategy as well.
I guess it's our security, but it's not just the financial part. It's being disconnected and so forth.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've actually had, like those videos I talked about a minute ago, we've had employer groups where they've had to stand down staff, and they're starting to get them back now, but they've been using our messages just as a way to keep in touch, and that keeps that connectedness with the business. But we felt that there's an obligation to go and share the insights we get. You know, we've got life and trauma cover and so forth within your super. They start to look at what claims are coming in or what people are ringing up about, and a lot of it is about feeling mentally strained. And you know, our concerns are you know, suicide and things like that, because that is a real part of, if you look at the tourism industry, it's been hard hit, and you look at the supporting industries around that, they've also been hard hit, to the point that, yeah, at Hostplus, for example, with the insurance, we actually cover suicide, which I know is a bit of a morbid topic to be talking about here today, but it's interesting to know, and I think it's helpful to know that unfortunately people are under stress, so do check in with them. And if something does happen, we actually support them. Whereas some superannuation companies or some insurance companies will not cover suicide, whereas we will, because we recognise a big part.
I think there's 2 really important messages I take away from that, Peter, and, you know, I'll be interested to hear our perspective of our audience as well today. But A is, you know, it's mental well-being is an important topic we should be continuing to talk about. But it's the importance of data and learning how we need to talk about it and how we should talk about it. And like you said, there's some really cool indirect ways to doing it, so it's not confronting, hence through the Facebook group and those little videos. There's some awesome tips. But the second is about actually understanding what super is and the importance of those insurances that sit in super. And I'm sure there's, you know, particularly some generations of employees for our members that probably don't understand the actual really importance of those insurances and what they're there for, that sit in your superannuation. Probably something I've really only taken myself more seriously in my last 10 years rather than when I was in my 20s. Yeah, whatever. What's that?
More than children will do that to you.
Absolutely.
But there's a change that actually happened last year. So on the 1st of April last year, and we look at here in South Australia, we'd been shut down pretty much from a business point of view on the 23rd of March. April sort of snuck past us without quite noticing. But one of the significant things that happened there is there was actually quite a fundamental change in the insurance in the superannuation industry. And that is that with the Royal Commission that they had previously, they were concerned that people with low balances, their super was being eroded. So if there was an account that was considered dormant, they consider dormant no activity for 16 months.
Okay. Yeah.
What happened for those people? So, and often there's some people who might work for one employer and have a superannuation there, but they might change job and have another little one somewhere else, and they forget about them. They've got these odd supers, which is, I'm not a big fan of that, and that you're wasting money on fees.
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly. Yeah.
But those superannuation funds or accounts typically had some life and total and permanent disability cover on them, and there'd be a premium coming out every month. So what would happen there is there was a concern that those small balance ones would get eroded away. So they brought in this new Protect My Super legislation, where any of those accounts that had not been touched and had a balance less than $6,000 was sent over to the tax office for safekeeping. So they didn't get eroded away. But of course, in that, it also counted with the insurance you might have. So that was one element of it. If you had an account where it had more than $6,000 on it, but it still hadn't been touched for 16 months, it stayed in the super environment wherever it was. But what happened is the super company was obliged to turn off the insurance. So that was a really important part that a lot of people missed last year. The other thing that came in at the same time was when you joined up a super account, you used to automatically get insurance. And that changed as well, in that it was deemed that, well, insurance premiums were eating into balances. So they changed it from an automatic to an opt-in, whereas before it used to be you'd get insurance, and if you didn't want it, you'd opt out. The worst case, so you'd always have insurance. So now it's an opt-in for people who have balances under $6,000 or someone who's under 25 years old, which is, you look in our industry, a lot of the people are under 25 years old. Yeah. So when a young person, whether it's a part-time job while they're at uni or they've just left school or whatever, they don't have insurance unless they opt in. So when you talk about a conversation that an employer or one of the TIXA members could be having with their staff, if you've got young people, then it might be something worth saying, check your insurance. Do you have it? Do you want it? Have you thought about it?
That conversation point and understanding why you need it as well.
Yeah. The other thing we find is most, particularly young people, when they've got a finance question or a super question, they go to the smartest person they think they know. And everyone's thinking, oh, that'll be mum or dad. Yeah. Often it is not. Yeah. Often it is whoever does the payroll at the place they work or their boss. Yeah. They consider you're in business, you're smart, I'll ask you my questions. So we find that there's a lot of that. Yeah, so that's what we try and help to keep those people informed.
Yeah, fabulous. No, that's really interesting, and I think it's important. I feel like we've worked backwards here in terms of picking your brain for lots of questions, and wrapping it up in terms of where Hostplus sit in it as well. So, and talking about that, educate our members and the people on today, Barry, on really who is Hostplus.
Okay.
Yeah, it might be. I feel like we're working backwards, but it's always a good way to go sometimes.
That's okay. Well, it's reverse engineering, isn't it? So look, who are we as an organisation? So we're Hostplus. So and look, a lot of people would see us in that we've recently been involved with some of your conferences and awards nights and so forth, and anyone where there's an overlap, they might see us supporting the hotel industry, they might see us helping the wine industry. So our passion and our objective is to support hospitality, which can be anywhere from your country pub through to one of your bars or nightclubs in the city. We look after tourism, so whether that's someone who's doing a dolphin tour or again, it might be one of the big 5 stars or a holiday resort. That's who we look after as far as people, but we also look after recreation and sport. So community clubs, we look after community clubs, we look after football clubs, cricket clubs. So we look after those sort of things both at a big level. So we're involved with the AFL, but out in Renmark, we look after the super for the footy club out there too. So
and that's, you're engaged with the community. That's the grassroots.
Yeah, so that's who we are. So pretty much that's the people we deal with, and of course anyone who loves all those things, which is just about most of us. So that's who our member base is. As far as an organisation, we're an industry super fund. So where you see the ads on TV where they do the industry super fund logo, and just for people's understanding, what does that even mean? We're funds that are we don't have commissions and so forth, so that it's the profits go back to the members. It's not our money. We're the custodians of other people's money. So me working for Hostplus, I'm on a salary to come and have a conversation with everyone today, or to go to a workplace. I don't get incentives or bonuses or those sort of things for that sort of thing, because it's our job and that's how we do it. We're very serious about the service part of our business. The benefit there, and I was talking a minute ago about, fees, returns, that's what your nest egg is. I suppose the benefit of an industry super fund is the fees are typically low and there's no commissions, because we're not paying a dividend to shareholders. Essentially, the shareholders are our members, so profits back to them. So that just puts a bit more in people's pocket. Our objectives are to give, and you use the word before, people a dignified retirement. If we said, when we come to work and look at what we do in a day, putting our members' interests first, if we're writing a document to do something, or we're going to do a sponsorship, one of those things I just spoke about, it's always a case of what is in it for our member and how does it help them have a better life in retirement.
Yeah. That's some pretty strong values, and great to see that you guys wear that on your sleeves, because not a lot of organisations operate like that, and it's great to know of the ones who do. And I think particularly even more through perhaps the journey we've all had in the past 12 months, we've really realised that beneath everything is the human spirit and those values that are so important. And I think people are more aligned to taking on that mindset as well through our journey of the last 12 months as well.
Yeah, and look, we don't just do that with how we treat people as in the operational stage of the business, but we also do it in how we invest. Where there's ethical investments to be involved in, but we're a $50-odd billion super fund, which is pretty big in Australia, where obviously there's some that are probably double the size of us, but we're a pretty big fund for what we do and who we look after. So there's responsibility with that, but there's also an opportunity where we can invest the money into some venture capital for businesses. So there's research companies, for example, doing vaccinations that are needleless, which are basically a powder base that you stick on your arm. And we think that that's potentially a future benefit to the world, and certainly a lucrative thing as well if it kicks off. So,
a huge industry at the moment, anything related to vaccines.
And very topical, and forgive the pun, in the skin and not in an injection. But there's things like that. Electric cars, we can see that so there's also things that are going to make it a better world. And we are in a position where we can invest in those to help those businesses get up. They're also, we've had a look at it, they're businesses where we think that they're going to give a good return. And so our members' interests are still at heart there from a financial point of view, but it's also an opportunity to help the world be a better place.
Yeah, no, that's fabulous. Well, Peter, we might wrap it up there today, unless anybody's got any questions, but I understand sometimes people prefer the questions a bit one-on-one in a more personal environment. So, like I said, I'll drop an email to you all with Peter's contact details. And I might even ask if you're popping you on the spot here, Peter, but to share some of those videos with me, because I might flick those into the email as well, so people get a real idea of those ways we can be communicating with our staff. staff, because I think that well-being, it all forms part of that consciousness about our employee well-being as we continue to move through this, and you know, have those, like you said, it's hard for an employer to have those conversations about financial sustainability and really understand the importance about superannuation to some of the generations we employ.
Yeah, well, what I'll do is, we've got some information on MetLife and what
they're that would be great.
So I'll share that with you. So anyone that wants that for Kathy, sing out to Kathy. I'll give you some of those videos. And I guess finally, the other thing we can do in the service we provide is we do comparisons. So if you've got a super fund that you've got and you're looking at, do I change it or not? We can do a comparison to, and we're honest about it. There might be an opportunity where we say, hey, what you've got is pretty good and you could keep it. Or we can say, here's where we might better help your workers. So those services are available. So sing out and we're happy to help.
And I think for our members who are owner-operators of businesses too, there's some great conversation points that you might have to have for your own super, not just your employees, but yourself as a business owner as well. It's also really important to be looking at what are you doing about your own super contributions as well as we move forward.
Yeah, and a question that came up is, will I do private consultations and that sort of stuff? The answer to that is yes. Anyone is very welcome to talk to me. And I treat myself, I consider myself a little bit when it comes to finance, a bit like a GP, that I might not know the answers to everything, but I know the specialist that you'll probably need. So
steer us in the right direction. Oh, absolutely. Fabulous. Thanks so much, Peter. Really appreciate your you've been so generous today of your time and me allowing to pick your brain with some random questions. And I hope it's been valuable for our whole audience that have stayed on through the whole call as well. I'll flick that email out today. And in the meantime, keep cool. Enjoy the summer that's finally hit us. And exactly. And we look forward to being in touch with you all soon. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Kathy. See you, everyone.
Thanks, Peter.